My name is Stanislaw Robert Luberda with AV Ultra, and this is lesson 10 of 10 in my Introduction to After Effects course, talking all about exports in After Effects. So there's lots of different ways to get things out of After Effects. The main things I want to talk about today, though, are exporting with alpha channels and just exports in general. This is for my friend's website, Allerton Avenue, that covers all things pop culture and video game related information. Be sure to check it out if you're interested. This specific export right here is for a transition in between their videos. You'll notice that it covers the screen completely and then wipes in and wipes off. It's very common to do that to kind of hide where certain cuts would happen. Let me show you another example that we've got here. The rest of this is actually transparent. While it doesn't look transparent here, if I laid this on top of another video, this would all be transparent and the only thing playing would be right here. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got this ready to go. In the background, there's actually full transparency. And I can tell that because, well, I've got nothing else on my timeline at this time, but I can also toggle my transparency grid. And that's this button right here. And as soon as I click that, if I have full transparency in the background, you'll notice that it goes all checkerboard. Very similar to Photoshop in terms of letting us know what exactly is transparent there. The reason why it's not solid white or solid gray was because that could be confused with a solid. So I've got this wipes in and it wipes off. I have a couple options to actually export this from After Effects. So I'm going to go ahead and click on File, Export, Add to Render Queue. If you're on older versions of After Effects, it might just be under Composition, Add to Render Queue. And as soon as we go ahead and click that, we're given some different options here. We have our render settings, our output module, and then where we're going to output it to. For our purposes right now, I'm just going to go ahead and put this on the desktop. And I'm just going to call it Allerton Avenue Transition 2. That's fine with me. And then under our render settings, I'm going to twirl this down, and this gives us some information here. Now, all of this information is accessible if I just click on this Best Settings. And when I click on Best Settings, it's basically asking me how I want to export this. So I'm going to actually export this as Best, Full Resolution, and I'm not going to use any proxies. I'm going to use the current effects, if there's any solo switches, etc. So for our purposes right now, we're going to leave all of this as is. And I'm going to come back down here to our output module. So this is the most important part when we're actually talking about exports here. If I twirl this down, it gives me a lot more information. So right now this is telling me that this is a QuickTime format and it is in animation codec. That's not necessarily what I want. So let's go ahead and click this lossless. And if I click this lossless, this is going to be pretty similar to some of the things in, let's say, Premiere when you hit export media. We have our format, so I can pick my different formats. For our purposes, I'm going to pick QuickTime. And under my format options, I'm going to go ahead and click format options, and we have some different codecs. Because I'm on a Mac, I'm going to be using Apple ProRes 4444. I can also use 422 if I want to, but for our purposes right now, I'm going to use 4444. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Under my channels here, you'll notice I have RGB. Under my depth, I have millions of colors, and I have color premultiplied matted. What this means right now is that it is only going to export the RGB data. So if I hit export right now, I'm not going to get any kind of this transparency because our transparency is alpha channels. So if I click back on lossless, I'm going to go into my format options and pick my ProRes 4444. I'll hit OK. And under my channels, I can pick RGB or RGB plus alpha. And you'll notice right away that our colors turns into colors plus. That means plus alpha. The last thing I'm going to want to do is come down to my color and make sure that it is straight, unmatted. Now, if you're looking for the difference between straight and premultiplied, that's going to be in a different lesson. If you want anything with clean alpha channels, you're going to want to go with straight. There is a pretty big difference. It is a little bit beyond the scope of this lesson. And so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'm doing a ProRes 4444 right now because that's supported on the Mac. As of September 2016, Adobe has announced that they are going to be supporting ProRes on the Windows platform in the future. However, as of today, September 16th, 2016, that is not available. So for you guys on Windows, you have a couple other options. So if I come down here to Custom, go under Format Options, you'll notice that I have lots of other ones. You may think, well, hey, why can't I just output to H.264? Well, I can go ahead and click that because that's supported by everybody. However, H.264 does not work with RGB and alpha channels. You can either get the RGB information or the alpha information. You cannot get both. So please be aware of that. For you Windows people, you may want animation, which is going to be a very, very large file size, or you may want to pick out the DNxHD codec. If you don't mind working with lots of frames that you can put together later, you can even actually export this with a PNG or even a TIFF format. So if I go under my TIFF, you can see I can pick my RGB and alpha, and PNG will have that same way. If possible, if you guys are on Windows, I would recommend the Avid DNx HD codec, as that gives us some pretty good compression versus size. So we have our RGB plus alpha and our millions of colors plus and our straight unmatted. And I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So now we have our best quality at full resolution and exporting it with our alpha channel. So we're actually using the DNx HD codec, and we have our RGB plus alpha, and this is going to go onto our desktop. So I can go ahead and hit render, and that's going to go ahead and render out in the background here. And once it's complete, it'll be on our desktop. However, there's lots of times that I want to keep working or doing other things while my stuff is rendering. One of the other options is I can actually take my file and go to File, Export, and add to the Media Encoder queue. And that again is going to open up our Adobe Media Encoder in the background, and we'll have some more options to launch there. Which is the right option to export really depends on what you're going to do with this. If I don't care about transparency and I just want to render something out of After Effects, I can just go to File, Export, Add to Render Queue, and we can export this. Instead of lossless, we can go into our format options and go down to H.264. If I export an H.264, it will not honor any alpha channels because that codec just doesn't support it. Notice that we have our RGB and our alpha, but we cannot do both of them at the same time. And you'll notice now that changed to Custom QuickTime. One of the best things about using After Effects is lots of times if I'm rendering stuff out, I just want to preview it. I can actually set this to a quarter resolution. So notice it's going to give it to me at 480 by 270. And maybe I don't care about the best settings. I just want to see the draft settings. And now that's going to actually export a much smaller file in resolution. What that means is that it's going to render a lot faster, and I can kind of preview it, or I can send it to my client and say, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking before I go ahead and actually hit the full resolution render. What's great about this is I can actually save this as a preset. So I can come down here and make this a template, and I can say, hey, this is going to be quarter resolution. So this is at quarter, and everything is checked off and left as is, and I can just say 1/4 res draft. I can hit OK, and notice it pops up there. And same with down here. So maybe I want two different formats. I want one that's going to be an H.264. Notice we have our width and height that's already been assumed from this last one. And I can even add a second one down here. I hit the plus button. So as soon as I hit this, I'm going to go ahead and pick a ProRes 4444 or an Avid DNx HD, hit OK, choose my RGB and alpha, millions of colors plus, and now it's actually going to export two different versions, one right after the other. So this works a lot like the Adobe Media Encoder, except this is all inside of After Effects. And again, if I hit render, it's just going to lock this up a little bit, where if I use the Media Encoder, I can kind of do it as a batch. Notice I still have my same settings here, and I can even choose some different settings I have here. So I have some ProRes 422, I also have some Cinepack in 1080, some DXV, etc. So it's a really useful way to get out several different copies at once. And then once that's completed, it looks a little like this. Again, notice it's just black in the background because this is a flattened video. However, if there were videos there, they would go ahead and play between these. So this would actually wipe it on and off. So that is exports in Adobe After Effects. Again, my name is Stanislaw Robert Luberda with AV Ultra, and this has been lesson 10 of 10 in my Introduction to After Effects course. If you made it through all 10 lessons, congratulations. Be sure to leave a comment, let me know what you thought of the class. And if you're looking for more lessons in After Effects or Premiere or other programs, be sure to check out my channel, AV Ultra Online, or check out my website, Stanislaw Robert Luberda. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.